The cabin hummed with the steady rhythm of the plane as Flight 841 ascended from London, bound for America. Among the passengers sat Mary, a young black woman with simple clothes and an air of quiet confidence. No one knew her story. No one knew who she was. But she was different. Her presence in the first-class cabin was like an enigma. The other passengers, dressed in their designer suits and luxury attire, took notice. Who was she? How had someone like her earned a seat in this exclusive section of the plane? As the flight progressed, Mary remained composed, seemingly unfazed by the stares and whispers. But beneath the surface, something was bubbling. Tension was building, and no one could have predicted the shocking events that would follow. Emily, one of the flight attendants, moved through the cabin, performing her duties with a robotic precision. But when her eyes landed on Mary, there was something in her gaze, an unmistakable disdain. She had seen people like Mary before, and she didn't like them. It wasn't just that Mary was black. It was how she didn't fit the mold of the privileged elite that usually occupied first class. The judgment was clear, though Emily kept it hidden behind her polite smile. The flight continued, but an invisible tension simmered between the two women. Emily's glances grew longer. Mary, sensing it, kept her head down. A quiet storm was brewing, and it wouldn't be long before it erupted. It happened suddenly. A flight attendant's tray tipped, sending drinks spilling across the cabin. Some passengers gasped, others muttered. But in that moment, Emily's irritation flared. Her eyes locked onto Mary, who was still sitting in her seat. "Look what you've done!" Emily snapped, her voice cold and biting. The tone was sharp, and Mary's heart skipped. "Can't you sit still?" Mary was taken aback. The flight had been calm until now. Before she could respond, Emily reached down to clean up, but not without brushing against Mary's clothes. It was a deliberate, rude gesture, one that felt like an insult. But what happened next shocked everyone. Mary's simple shirt was suddenly yanked at by Emily, tearing slightly as she tried to fix the mess. It wasn't just an accident. It was a calculated move, an attempt to humiliate Mary in front of everyone. The passengers fell silent, watching the scene unfold. No one dared speak up. Mary froze. Her face turned red, but not with anger. It was a mix of hurt and disbelief. How could someone, especially a flight attendant, treat her this way? Was it because of her clothes, or because of her skin? The passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one intervened. Mary could feel the weight of their gazes on her, some sympathetic, some judgmental, but all were silent. She had no choice but to endure the public humiliation, or so it seemed. Mary's fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. The plane was nearing its descent into America, but she had no intention of waiting. She wasn't going to sit idly by while someone like Emily thought they could get away with this. Her thumb hit the speed dial button. Joseph, her closest confidant, picked up immediately. Joseph wasn't just a friend, he was the owner of several major airlines. A powerful man, but also the kindest person she knew. "I'm buying this airline," Mary said, her voice steady and composed. "I want to make a statement." Joseph didn't hesitate. "Done." No one on board had any idea of the storm that was about to hit them. As the plane touched down in America, a sudden announcement echoed through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats for a moment." Confusion spread through the cabin. Was there a problem? Why the delay? But then, the pilot's voice broke through. "We are pleased to announce that, effective immediately, this airline has a new owner. The woman sitting in first class, Mary, is now the new owner of this airline." The cabin fell into stunned silence. The whispers spread like wildfire. Mary, the woman they had all looked down upon, was now the owner of the very airline they were flying on. How had they misjudged her so thoroughly? The atmosphere shifted. All eyes were on Mary. The quiet woman they had ignored had just revealed a bombshell. Emily stood frozen, her face pale, She had humiliated Mary, disrespected her, and now she was realizing the full extent of her mistake. The flight attendant had been so quick to judge, so quick to belittle, without ever stopping to consider who Mary truly was. For the first time, Emily felt a sinking shame. She glanced over at Mary, who was now standing tall in the aisle, meeting everyone's gaze with a calm, unyielding presence. I'm sorry, Emily stammered. Her pride was gone. I didn't know. Mary's expression softened. It's all right, but this is a reminder. We can't judge people based on how they look. There was a pause. The flight attendant swallowed hard, and for a moment, the entire cabin was silent. As the plane taxied toward the gate, the reality of the situation settled in. The other passengers, now fully aware of who Mary was, couldn't help but stare. Some looked at her with awe, while others with regret. They had all underestimated her. Mary stood at the front, her posture commanding respect. I didn't buy this airline to prove anything to you, she said, her voice carrying through the cabin. But maybe it's time you all learned that appearances can be deceiving. Just because someone doesn't look the part doesn't mean they don't belong. The passengers listened intently. Some felt guilty for their past judgments. Others felt a newfound respect for the woman who had silently endured so much. Mary looked out over the cabin, her eyes locking with the passengers one by one. This isn't just about me, she continued. This is about all of us. We need to stop judging people by their clothes, their skin color, or their background. Humanity is more than that. The passengers remained silent. Emily, standing at the back, nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand the weight of Mary's words. This isn't just about ownership, Mary added, her voice steady. It's about understanding. It's about empathy. We all deserve respect. Her words echoed long after the announcement ended. For everyone on board, this was a moment that would stick with them forever. As the plane taxied to the gate, the atmosphere was thick with tension and disbelief. Passengers who had once looked down on Mary were now left in stunned silence, processing the shocking revelation. They couldn't stop talking about what had just happened, how the quiet, unassuming woman they had all judged was, in fact, the new owner of the very airline they had flown on. The cabin, which had once been filled with whispers of disdain and curiosity, now echoed with murmurs of respect and realization. The truth had come crashing down, and the passengers knew they could never look at her, or anyone, the same way again. The flight attendants, including Emily, stood near the door as passengers began to disembark. Emily shifted nervously, her hands trembling slightly. She couldn't shake the weight of her actions, the humiliation she had caused, and the judgment she had passed so carelessly. She avoided eye contact with Mary, but the silence between them spoke volumes. Then, as the last few passengers made their way out, Emily found herself standing face to face with Mary. The flight attendant hesitated, then spoke, her voice shaky. I owe you an apology, she said, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I didn't know who you were. I didn't understand. Mary looked at her, her expression softening. There was no anger, no resentment in her eyes, only understanding. I know, she said quietly. But I hope this lesson sticks. You'll remember this moment when you judge someone next time, won't you? Emily nodded, a mix of guilt and gratitude in her gaze. I will. The last passengers filed off the plane, and Mary stood there for a moment, watching them leave. She had made her point, not with power or force, but with quiet grace. Her presence had spoken louder than any words. As she stepped off the plane and into the terminal, Mary knew this flight would be a defining moment for everyone on board. It wasn't just a lesson about wealth or status, it was a lesson about humanity. People weren't defined by their appearance, their clothes, or their race. We all deserved respect, and that lesson would stay with them for a lifetime,